Welcome to The Pestle, reviewing and breaking down movies to look for insights into the movie-making process. Hosted by Frank Johnson and Peter Bush. Let's get all up into some movies, y'all.
Welcome everybody to The Pestle. Today's show is brought to you by Meat Cute Charcuterie. Get a real taste of Seattle's local cuisine at the Meat Cute. Welcome everybody to The Pestle. I am Wes.
And I am Todd.
And this is a movie podcast where we analyze, break apart movies to, see what they're made of and all the fun and gory bits, as it sometimes comes down to with filmmaking. One of the things I actually really like about our show, if I can be self-aggrandizing in that way, a little self-serving, is that I listen to a fair amount of podcasts, like all over the place. Like some are film-based and some are, political, and some are just talking about true crime stuff, all this stuff. And one thing that I think we do better than the average podcast is if you click on this episode and it's about Miami Vice and it's, let's say, an hour long, you're going to spend about 55 minutes of hearing us, discuss and look at Miami Vice. It's not going to be, 20 minutes of us discussing Miami Vice and then, 40 minutes of us discussing what we did for lunch and how someone, whatever, farted in our dinner or something. Like, it's going to be like actual...
I don't know where you're eating. But...
Well, I'm not eating there anymore.
Last time.
Yeah.
Fool me 3 times.
And so we do like to, stay pretty well on topic, and I would say we do a really, really good job at that, even though, we'll go on a rant here and there, but usually it almost always ties right back into the topic at hand. And so for that, hats off to us.
Absolutely. I mean, there's so much to talk about, though, with films that I think it's really easy to fill an hour. We've tried so many times to make this podcast 30 minutes. And we fail miserably. I think there was didn't we do one? We tried to do one in 7 minutes.
We tried a 7-minute pestle, yeah.
And we couldn't do that. We planned it. We even planned it, and we couldn't do that. So I think we're just really two guys that like talking about movies and an excuse to watch movies. So that's just what this is. And yeah, I can't believe we're on episode 117. That's great.
It's insane.
So today, spoiler alert, we are covering Miami Vice. So if you haven't seen the Michael Mann version, please pause this episode, go watch it. I think it was 2011 came out.
2006.
2006. Oh man. Okay, cool. And so yeah, obviously not the old version. So go watch that and then come back and join us.
Nice. Yeah, we'll talk about a bunch of things, I think, more or less. Definitely touch on some of the cinematography, shooting multiple formats, as well as emulating a style that I think they're going for in certain parts. We'll also touch on story and writing, starting deep into the story, as well as grounding the world. I think that's Michael Mann's specialty, and other such stuff and things and stuff.
So a synopsis of the film. Based on the 1980s TV action drama, this update focuses on Vice detectives Crockett and Tubbs as their respective personal and professional lives become dangerously intertwined. It's written and directed by Michael Mann, cinematography by Dion Beebe, and starring Colin Farrell as Sonny Crockett, Jamie Foxx as Rico Tubbs, Lee Gong as Isabella, Naomie Harris as Trudy, John Ortiz as Jose Yero, and Barry Shabaka Henley as Castillo.
Where's Yero?
Right here. And I brought your friend. Oye, hermano, she mine now. Jesus gave her to me to ask questions and find out interesting things. We a couple now. After work, she and me go catch a movie and grab a bite. When I get tired, I throw her away. Her leg in one place, her head someplace else. You guys ever see that? Anyway, she here now to make sure everything go right.
Still no shooter.
My guy. Show him the money. I don't want him.
Why? What difference does it make, Sonny?
Listen to me, asshole. I do not want that motherfucker near me. You want to see her dope? You send Isabella. Where it travels.
Stay here.
I could definitely finish watching the rest from there. I played that scene just because how much I love John Ortiz, especially in this role. He's a really heavily underutilized actor in Hollywood. You've seen him in other films like Silver Linings Playbook and some other things.
Carlito's Way.
Carlito's Way, nice. And he is so good, and he just he's my favorite thing in the entire movie to watch, on my part. But
Definitely.
all that aside, I don't know if you've ever seen this before now. I don't know if you caught it back when it originally came out, but I am curious how you responded to this.
Yeah, I haven't seen this movie before, but I was interested to watch it because I'm a big Jamie Foxx fan, and Colin Farrell. I think it depends on the role, really.
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily think he's a bad actor. It's just
some roles are bringing out the best in him, and some really aren't.
Yeah. He's like a little bit like a watered down version of Tom Cruise in some ways. And I don't mean that as a slight. I just mean like, he's really attractive, can do action relatively well, not like Tom Cruise. Let's be very clear. But can play action roles, relatively well. I just, he's just doesn't jump off the page for me in any particular role. So anyway, I was looking forward to seeing this, and I gotta admit, okay, it felt like it was all over the place in a few ways. Okay, let's just start with some of the music choices were brilliant and really made me pulled me in. At the very end, what a great musical choice! Oh my gosh, I forgot what track that is.
Was it Audio Slave?
No. It was an instrumental track. It was after the Audio Slave track, I think.
Gotcha.
But I'm not an Audio Slave fan.
Mm-hmm.
I've never been an Audio Slave fan.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Soundgarden or bust, baby. Sorry. But anyway, so from the very beginning, it was like, okay, for anybody who's ever bought a new HD TV, they come with this setting on them called motion something.
Motion smoothing, right? Usually something
motion
like that.
Smooth. Thank you. And it's by default it's turned on, and they do that for a reason, because if that unit is going to be played in a store as a display, they want that to be on, because normally they put sports on, and sports look fantastic with this setting on it. I will admit they do, because it's live TV with live people moving around. But they completely destroy the cinematic experience of an actual film. Right, something that's shot at usually 30 frames a second, right? And this motion thing basically fills in the gaps to make it 60, right, or 120 even. It just feels fake AF. And there was this moment, this one shot of one of their partners, the guy who has ended up flying the helicopter, whom we never see again after he's flying the helicopter, maybe once or twice, but anyway, he's flying the helicopter. That same guy, when he's planting the camera, it feels like all of a sudden it goes to that setting. It's 60
ghosty,
frames a second. Yeah, it's 60 frames a second for a couple of seconds. And then it goes back to this really grainy kind of feeling like it's shot on film which it might have been. I don't even know. But it was, at first I was like, oh, this is going to be good, because it was really, grainy. You could tell it was moody, and then that happened. I was like, whoa, okay, that's weird. And then they did this weird combination of locked off and handheld in the same scenes. It was really strange. It was like I could never ground myself because I didn't know where we were going next with the cuts, right? And that's not really a thing that I think about, you know? I just experience the film. I get all the angles that my brain needs to tell me the story, and then we move on to the next scene. But in this case, I was getting stuff from every direction. There was like over, you know, dirty shots from over the shoulder, and then close-ups on somebody while he's talking to the same guy, and like, you know, then like moving for no reason to some other part. It just really felt strange to me, and I don't know why they did that, but they did it a lot. I mean, there were several moments. I mean, and then it was like, I just got to say, it was really sloppy in so many ways. The sound was terrible. It was really bad. It was like the ADR was okay because you know they were ADRing in the car. Like, there's no way they could be driving.
Maybe, I don't know. I didn't pick up any ADR. If they did, like, they did it really well because it sounded, you know, natural enough to me.
Yeah, not me. And then anyway, there were just a lot of things that did not fall well. It was, yeah, the editing was weird. The story was, you know, good enough. It was what I would expect from Miami Vice. You know, they're in Miami, they dealing with drug lords, and they're trying to stop one, and, you know, then some people die that shouldn't and stuff. But at the beginning, the thing that I was, you know, kind of like, oh, this is going to be good. The reason I was feeling like that is because the very first, I think maybe one of the first guys that dies, he like just walks in front of a bus or in front of a truck, and he gets laid out, and then you see the streak of blood. I'm like, oh my God, that was really violent. This might be good. And then the scene of those guys getting blown away in the car from inside the car.
Yeah.
And then, oh my gosh, that was brutal. And then you think it's done, and then he gets another 50 cal straight through the chest.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because it looks like the scene is settling down, the car is not shaking, and then another boom.
Boom.
I love the kind of shock going through the car itself. Like,
totally,
we're mounted, the camera's like mounted within the car, and we're moving with it, and it's just chaos.
Yes. I loved that, and those were both in the beginning.
Yeah,
and it just got worse from there. And here's the thing: I didn't expect an amazing story. I really didn't. In fact, I knew there wasn't going to be one. So if there would have been like this extravagant story, I could have overlooked all these things. But like, dude, it was a total mess lighting wise. The lighting was all over the place. In some scenes it was bright, in other scenes it was super dark and like unbalanced. The like I said, the audio was like really strange. The music was played at really odd times that like made me listen to the music instead of really watching the film. And it what's her name, the Asian woman who the main
Isabella
Asian woman, Isabella, thank you. Gong, she was great. She was amazing in this film.
yeah.
I thought Jamie Foxx's performance was okay. It wasn't, I mean, what do you do with that role, you know, that hasn't been done by 100 other people? But just because it's Jamie Foxx, I like expect something incredible. Colin was exactly how I expected him to be. I think John Ortiz and Gong were the best parts of this film, easily, hands down. It didn't really, I don't really have a whole lot to say other than it just felt like it was all over the place, and I could never get my bearings. And I have to blame the cinematography on that. Or maybe it's the editing. Maybe it's not the cinematography. But I do want to blame the cinematography in that reason why it felt like somebody has a 5D, get them over here to get this shot because we ran out of batteries in the Alexa or something. You know what I'm saying? And then they just throw in this other footage that had no place being there, with like that was obviously not shot on the same camera. Am I wrong?
No. So this was shot on mixed multiple formats, partly on film, partly on digital cameras. And you have to remember, this was released in 2006. And so the Alexa wasn't making the rounds when this was being filmed, which was probably in 2004. And so in 2004, think about digital technology at that point. I looked up the cameras, and I never held or looked at one of those before, so I won't go into detail about what they were and how they operate. But I think, for a number of reasons, part of it was definitely filmed on film stock, Kodak, 50D and 500T, which, just for anyone's curiosity, whenever you see those numbers on like a film stock or on a camera, and you start hearing these kind of 50 and 500, these numbers thrown around, that's a reference to its ISO, which is how sensitive the film is to light. And the higher the number, the more sensitive it is to light. So that if you're trying to film in low light conditions, like in a club, you need really, really sensitive film, so that the light registers a lot easier, as opposed to in broad daylight. There's a lot of light there, and you don't need a lot of sensitivity. So the 50 on 50D would be the ISO setting, and the D stands for daylight, the color balance, because with film you don't get to choose what the color temperature is. It's baked into the film itself. And then same thing with 500T. The 500 film is 10 times more sensitive in a sense of 50D. And then so 500T, this is interior lighting, so the T stands for tungsten. It's balanced for tungsten lighting. And so if you ever come across a film stock, or if you're thinking about shooting Super 8mm, that's what those numbers mean. And so I felt like for the film stock and the digital cameras, they had two different kind of purposes. They mixed in. I think they did as well as they could in terms of trying to intercut them, and they do intercut the hell out of digital and film throughout the movie. I think just to try to keep it from feeling as jarring, because after living through that for 15, 20 minutes, you kind of settle into the look. Instead of, if they waited every so often to suddenly jump into digital, it would probably be a lot more jarring. At least that's what I think they were after, to some degree. And so for film, I felt like they were using film a lot for the close-ups. Maybe it's better on skin tones and is easier to create depth of field in the frame, so that you can isolate your subject a little more, like you're saying in the club, right? They're doing these close-ups on these people. And if we're shooting on the digital cameras, you may have a harder time because the sensor is so much smaller. You may have a harder time getting depth and isolating your subject. And then on top of that, the skin tone just does not look as good on digital. Now it's getting better, like modern day, but in 2004, 2005 technology, digital is definitely nowhere even close to film. And then I think for the digital cameras, I think the purpose they were trying to serve with that is it almost gives it this kind of homemade movie feel. And I think they're doing that on purpose, and I'll get to that in just one second. But one of the problems with digital, especially in this age, with these 2/3 sensors, not as much depth. And so composing your frame and the lighting are far more important to create depth and visual interest and to direct the viewer's eye. Because those are normally things that are a little easier to achieve with, film or longer lenses. And so those things become really important. You can see whenever they're using a lot of wide angles for the digital, like you step into the Kingpin's car, and we're just sitting in the back on this wide angle digital camera, and Sonny and Rico get into the car, and we just kind of hang out there, and you can see the entire interior. It feels huge. The space feels huge. We get to see him and the way they're talking. And so that's framed very specifically to keep your attention on him and make sure you feel the space is, exactly what he wants it to be. Everyone's waiting and responding on him. I feel like
By the way, I love that guy.
That guy, he was great.
He was so good, just so no emotion.
Owns it.
So
he is like, I'm the freaking man, and everyone's gonna know it. And
perfect beard.
Yeah, so huge.
Just like.
And so composing with a digital camera that doesn't have a lot of depth becomes super important. But I thought it was interesting that they seem to do a lot of these wide angles on digital, and that seems like a very Michael Mann thing to do. He likes close-ups using wide angles. And I think it adds a layer of drama and personality to the film that you're not going to get in a lot of other films. I don't think even Deakins goes as extreme, and Deakins likes a nice wide angle close up, but I think this is extreme even for Deakins. Not that he shot this, that's the point I'm trying to make here. And so they used digital. It seems like to me what they were getting at was they were using the digital for a lot of the action sequences. And I think for a couple of reasons, it adds this kind of live ops feel, almost like we were watching Desert Storm footage. And it just feels a little more grounded and real, like you're watching a feed from someone's assault whenever these things start popping off. If you think about not just the shootout at the end, but whenever they're trying to go after the trailer house where his girlfriend's being held, Trudy is being held, and you see all these digital angles. It's grainy, all the digital noises in there, and I think it adds to that kind of grounded stuff that Michael Mann really, aims for. And we'll definitely dive into how he grounds his worlds here in a minute. But I think even more than that, I feel like what he was trying to do throughout not the entire film, but through a lot of the film, was to emulate Cops, like we're watching an episode of Cops. And you can kind of feel that same handheld camera style that isn't necessarily always super motivated and doesn't try to hide itself in a lot of ways. And not to say that they intentionally get shadows of the camera and the camera op into shots. I think they did their best to avoid it, but they weren't afraid of it either. They were like, we're going to shoot this very, on the fly to give it that kind of immediate effect that you get out of an episode of Cops. And I feel like they're trying to call back to that cinema language and that visual style that we're used to as, people who clearly watch a lot of TV and are adjusted to that style. And so I feel like they're trying to take advantage of that idea. And then it also gives us a lot of visual information with these wide angles, these digitals. You're getting a lot of data. And I think that adds a lot of tension to the frame as we're trying to digest it all and process it all. It almost becomes overwhelming whenever there's tension in the moment of, is there another gunman that's going to pop out from behind the couch, when they're in the trailer. And so whenever you have this much information, you're acutely aware of everything that's happening, which is a fun and an opposite way to play it, because a lot of other times they shoot these tight close-ups, and not in this film, but a lot of other films focus during these moments of tension on close-ups so that you don't know what's beyond the frame. And they try to scare you that way. And they're both two different, forms of getting to the same idea that, just depends on your style and whether or not you're going to stay true to it. And they did a pretty strong job of staying true to that element when those moments happen, especially those heavy action sequences. As far as cinematography goes, it's really blue, like a lot of ocean, sky. Even at night, a lot of the time it feels blue, except for whenever they finally kind of pop into some of these kind of night vision-esque green textures every once in a while. But it's overall a very low, maybe a medium contrast, not super contrasty. And I think, again, that kind of adds into this grounded reality that he's presenting. And of course, a lot of handheld zoom lenses that goes right back into, we're trying to make this feel like something that we shot on the fly. We're capturing reality, almost like a documentary in a lot of ways. And I think that's just not always his style, but in this case, for sure. And while we're at it, just talking grounded, he does a lot of the way he grounds the reality, a number of ways. Operational activity, like whenever they're talking to OPSEC, right, and they have to verify their phone lines and whatever passwords, codes, and even whenever they're on the boat and he's like, here's our code. If it's Tuesday, that means it's going to be the DEA is our leak or whoever. And so it adds this layer of sincerity to the world, even if we're not always entirely following the when and the why. That's the way those worlds operate. They don't wait for someone else to catch up. They're there, and that's what we're trusting, is that they're in tune and they're asking for a thing with a purpose instead of, heavily relying on exposition to walk us through everything. And I think that makes sense really in this case, because the stakes aren't like crazy to understand. There's a drug lord, but we don't really even care about the drugs. The stakes are so obvious, and this is something Michael Mann tends to do a lot, which is life and death. That's all you need to know. People are going to live and people are going to die. And so the stakes are very simple, very easy to grasp. And he sets it up very quickly with the assault at the beginning. Like, we see those guys get shredded. Like, body parts are flying. And so we do a number of things in there, but it establishes the stakes, and it also sets up the MO of the bad guy, the villain. Becomes very easy to understand. It sets up later in the film that this is what they need to watch out for. There's going to be a handoff. There's going to be snipers, and they're not going to see it coming. And so our guys got to be ahead of the curve. And so he sets up all the stakes in the simplest, most efficient way possible. And with the digital camera and the way he's grounding it's very dirty. It's loose framing. It's imprecise at times. And he's removing a layer of polish that makes us feel, more unrehearsed and in the moment, instead of like there's this very elaborate dolly move. Because I guarantee sometimes we're ending an edit on nothing. Like, we just kind of pan over and there's really nothing there. And it's just kind of emulating us looking around to some extent of, drifting off and then coming back. Another thing he really likes to do, and this is something I really love, and it's something that apparently you hate, which is the audio feels true to audio capture. It's not exaggerated. He doesn't do a ton in post to amp it up and make it feel like Bad Boys. This isn't a Bad Boys movie, even though you could compare this in some, sense to Bad Boys, in the sense of cops in Miami dealing with drugs or whatever. And here, the gunfire sounds like gunfire sounds like. He doesn't make it sound like, some crazy, sweet sounding, whatever Rambo weapon. Like, this is going to be pop, 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 pop. That if you've ever been around live gunfire, you're like, yep, that's what guns sound like. And there's different sounds for different guns. And I think he does a really fantastic job of making it feel like we are watching, a documentary in a lot of ways of, these vice cops doing their thing. As far as grounding goes, I love the communication on the fly. I love that, we're driving boats while we're game planning. Like at the end, whenever they're rushing from the boat to the trailer park, like we're on headsets and they're driving and they're going really fast. And they're communicating with their boss, Castillo, and the chopper, and they're trying to hone in, and they're talking really quick and trying to get information as fast as possible. Personally, I love that style of filmmaking. That's much more my speed, where you're not telegraphing your move. They don't sit and powwow for a moment. They're like, no, there's absolutely no time to waste. And I'm not a big fan of these dramatic pauses as we're waiting for something to the audience to let register. There's a gun over there, and that gun could kill them at any second. Like, no. Like, she draws her weapon and she sets the guy up in the trailer, right? And she's like setting him up, and like, no, what will happen is this brain will fly, at 2,500 meters per second. And as he's in the middle of responding, she pops his ass. And that's such a satisfying, and I know you wouldn't complain about any of the action in this movie. That's what I think. Well, I assume you wouldn't. But I feel like that's what Michael Mann is always aiming towards. He's almost lulling you into the sense of safety before he brings out the guns. And that's when all the fun really sets up. Because there's not huge emotional investment, and I'll get to the story stuff here in a second, I guess. But as far as grounding goes, he does a really good job of, taking his time in order to set up the action sequences, which is ultimately, what we're here for. Even though it doesn't present itself as an action film, you'll walk away from this probably thinking more about, the action sequences. And with the real-time big gun fight, people are everywhere. Like, this feels super grounded, as it's almost really, really difficult to keep track of who's where and what's happening. It all happens really fast. And I think he does a really good job of keeping us oriented and understanding who's who and who's down, who's not. But at the same time, there's not a ton of pauses as someone's about to die. Like, John Ortiz bites it pretty fast. Like, he's taking a shot, and Jamie Foxx barrel rolls and opens him up against the wall, like, which is a callback to earlier in the film whenever their first meeting. There's that little joke whenever he's holding the grenade and he's like, people are going to, we could all sit here and make some money, or, we can splatter us all over the wall and people will come in and say, oh, what's this painting? Is that the new Jackson Pollock?
Yeah.
No, that's Jose Yero. And then at the end of the film, he ends up with his, blood all over the wall in a Jackson Pollock manner. So it's a light callback to what they set up in, the first act, which is loose and kind of fun if you minorly think about it. But everything in the gunfight happens super, super fast in a way that feels logistical and sensical. And like, I can imagine, even though it felt loose, I can imagine he spent, a good week mapping out on like a 2D top, like a football play. Oh, we're going to start here. He's going to go here and blah, blah, blah. And then once you get to that on the day, it becomes a lot easier. You're running your plays. You're talking to, hey, we're going to grab this sequence over here, and then we're going to grab this sequence over here. And it becomes a much more efficient way to shoot, and probably lets you get more emotionally taxed throughout the scene, because you don't have to worry so much about saving gas, right? You can just freaking go balls to the walls and really make it fun. And so, yeah, he's doing a lot, I think, to ground the world. And I think it works better in some films than others. I will say, I don't think you're wrong. I'm not disagreeing with anything you're saying, Todd. This is a movie that I think it either works for you or it doesn't. And for probably 90% of people, it doesn't work. Like, for me, this is my third favorite Michael Mann film. I love this movie. I've seen it the most of all his films, to be honest.
What?
Yeah. Like, I really enjoy this movie.
Sometimes I just don't get you.
I know. I love all the music.
What do you love? Okay, but tell me, what do you love about it? Like, why this more than Heat?
Well, I love Heat more. I love Collateral more. And those are the two above this. But I like watching this one more, I think, because it's a little offbeat. Like, Colin Farrell is doing this, different accent, which the first time I watched it, it took me 10 minutes to adjust. But then once I was adjusted, I was like, oh, that's okay. Like, I'm in, I'm fine. And we kind of run around the world. I don't really have a good justification or logicale for why I love this movie so much. It's just a fun movie. I love the action sequences. I love John Ortiz as a bad guy. And I love kind of the groundedness of it. I think it has a really fun visual language that's specific. I don't see this in any other movie that pulls it off, at least. Nothing that I would watch again, but this is just kind of, like you said, it's a little all over the place. And I find it fun. I find it visually interesting. I like the color, which might sound really stupid, but I actually really love the coloring. And the kind of noisiness of the movie. It feels very grainy, and the digital noise is fun to me. And yeah, so I like looking at it. I like the kind of cat and mouse that's going on. I love the stakes whenever Trudy gets blown up. I love the kind of reaction to that in a number of ways, because I really like how he gets on the phone with Jose Yero. And he realizes that, oh crap, Yero still doesn't know that we're cops. And it's a really great setup, because there's no reason he should know. There's no reason cops should be working on this. Like, that's what I think is really, smart about this setup. And in fact, let me just run through the story and writing and see if maybe this opens up why I like it, and maybe I can explain it, because I can't right now.
Sure.
Okay.
Well, keep digging, man. Keep digging.
So I love that it opens up in the club on right. We're on a dancer. We're in the middle of a sting operation, and I like it because we start as deep into the story as possible. We don't open on Rico saying goodbye to Trudy in the morning and Sonny waking up alone and there's a void in his life. Like, we don't go to these really obvious tropes, these cliches of cop movies where we're getting a feeling for their life. Not to say that those don't serve a purpose, but they're tired. And even the movies that do them well bore me, to be quite honest. They save the relationship connection for later. Like we have that sex scene between Trudy and Rico. And it's this personal moment with them, and it's building, of course, their connection. And what I really like about that scene is the humor. There's just this little jab of humor about him, right? Orgasming so soon. And we feel her deflate, but she doesn't say anything. She's going to be a good, partner. And it's like, it's fine. Like, and then we find out he was just joking. And then it starts the India RE song kicks in, and she's amazing. And I love that. The humor adds texture to their relationship, which I think helps add buy-in, because romantic relationships are fun. Like they have these fun moments, and it's not just hot sex. And I think that misses a lot of movies that are trying to portray an actual relationship. Now it makes sense if it's like the first time they were hooking up, it should probably be more passionate. There's not humor. You haven't gotten to that layer in your relationship yet, but they are at that point. And I love that they inject just a little joke that makes me believe that, yeah, they are together. And going back to the opening, so we're starting in the middle of an operation, and Sonny gets a call, and this is kind of a classic call to adventure, even though they're kind of in the middle of one. And he takes the call from Alonzo, and Tubbs gets on the phone after he finds out like there's something going wrong. Tubbs calls Alonzo's family, and we cut to the inside of the house, right? We see the white dude, bald, tatted up. He's got a swastika on his neck. And he's got a bloody glove. And so I love, that's very quick, easy visual communication, right? Swastika, bad guy. Bloody glove. Bad guy did something really bad to Alonzo's family. And if you're paying attention, there's a body just out of frame at the other end of the shot. And so they're doing these really quick visual communications. That's kind of the nice thing about swastikas. We, as is the fact that we can identify very quickly who's going to be a villain, and that's easy writing.
Soundbite.
It's the only nice thing about swastikas is that it helps us identify dickheads. And so I love that they, it's like, hey, why not take advantage of this iconography and help tell my story in a much more efficient way, and also get the audience on the right side of the story. And so Alonzo's call, also tells us that a deal is going bad. And of course we see the interior as, the car scene as the sniper fire hits, which I really love it. It's surreal, but it's also kind of grounded. It feels very raw and personal and devastating in a way. And so after hearing that his family is dead, right, Sonny and Rico catch up to him on the highway and pull him over, and they're having this conversation. I love this little shot that happens after he finds out his family's dead, and we see from his point of view. We look at Sonny, we look at Rico, and then we just kind of drift over to like these garbage or whatever kind of drifting in the wind at the road, and we just kind of hang out there for a second, and then we pause a moment, and then he kills himself. And I love the audio cut on that, because we just kind of cut out. We don't hear it, and instead we're left in a bit of silence as we're watching like this streak of blood, and if you catch it, like his body is being mangled up underneath the truck. It's absolutely brutal. And that whole sequence is a really simple and effective setup for where this guy's mind is at after getting news of his family. And so we feel it before he does it. We're like, oh no, is he gonna? And then we hear the truck, and it's just this really very, very quick, beautiful sequence that by the time you register what he's about to do, he's already doing it. And that's the kind of storytelling I really gravitate towards personally. And I see why Christopher Nolan looks, up so much to Michael Mann, which may surprise people. Like, he's a big Michael Mann fan. And then
Doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
I love Michael Mann.
Same. No, yeah. No, I hear you. And starting the undercover operation is where we jump to next, right? The feds are compromised and not sure where their leak is, and Sonny and Rico get to partake in a larger operation instead of just being city cops. Now we've kind of set the stage for this bigger bigger thing. And I really enjoy how they take out the competition to create an opening to meet with the bad guys. And so they bust these lower level drug runners and take their drug load and then use what they stole as a gift back to the villain as a way of building trust. Like, I feel like that's such a clever turn of not wasting anything. Not to say that this film doesn't have wasteful moments. There are, but with that setup and payoff, I feel like it's really, really smart. And it happens really fast. Just as a by the by, like, I think one wasteful moment is learning the bartender's name at the beginning. Like, he's hitting on her, and I think that it works in the sense of we're getting that Sonny is a smooth operator. Like, he's a ladies' man. I normally, if you give a character a name, it's to give them a bigger purpose, and obviously she didn't serve that. And so I suspect if I were to analyze this, there's probably a few more of those little moments that are a little wasteful, but ultimately it's not super detrimental. It's not something that, derails the film. But by and large, it's such a simple narrative that we don't need a lot of hand-holding. And they give us none. Like, you're kind of thrown in. And I think that's one of the other things I appreciate about it is there's not a lot of hand-holding and spoon-feeding. Like, you're either paying attention or you're not. You either understand why she just got kidnapped and why they don't know that these are cops, or you don't. And that kind of storytelling works really well for me whenever I know that I'm in the hands of a capable writer, which Michael Mann is. Like, this dude pours over every single thing, even though I don't think it's flawless. I have issues with it. Like, there's some dramatic dialogue that definitely crosses into hokey, but because of the tone of the entire movie, it works for me. They don't do it too much. They do it enough that it's like a little eye rolly, but it never really pulls me all the way out. And I'm talking about things like, if we wanted you dead, you'd no longer be drawing breath. And it's like, it's a little too Shakespearean for what we're trying to do here. We will close their eyes forever. Like, it's fun. I get what he's doing, but it also is like, okay, like, let's move on. And so not all of the dialogue completely works, which is not his normal writing style. He doesn't normally write these kind of chunky, dramatic lines like that. But maybe he's just trying to emulate what he thinks drug lords talk about, in the bedroom. Like, there's probably not a lot of source material there. And so, yeah, I don't know. I think that more or less is what draws me to it. There's fun sequences. I enjoy the boats. I like the go fast boats. I like some of the strategy involved with getting into the vein of the criminal element. I never feel like they're unjust, or in the sense of they haven't earned any of their payoffs or any of their moments. I always feel like it's pretty well earned. And it's a worthwhile time in a sense. Like, yeah, I think that's more or less what altogether. There's complexity without making you feel like it's too complex. It's simple, but not spoon-fed. I don't know.
Yeah,
it's fun.
And
the action sequences ultimately
are
what really makes me come back. I love all the shootouts. Every time. Yeah. Like, they're fun. Anyway, I'll stop.
No, it's fine. So a few things. One, I have no problem with bullets and guns sounding real.
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't my issue. It was that. Cause then when you hear a 50 cal, you know that's what a 50 cal fucking sounds like. It sounds like a cannon, because it basically is one, right? Yeah. But a handgun should not sound like a 50 cal. Right. So I totally get that.
Yeah.
I wish I could point out some moments, but there were at least a dozen moments I was like, that's not right.
Yeah.
That does not feel right. And I don't mean because it's real, I mean because, like, just wasn't done well. But a few other things that I feel like were okay. I just want to preface this with I love Michael Mann. I
This
like his
movie
films.
did not do well either, I think,
I
box
know.
office or with critics. Like, critics were
okay.
not on board. So you are you have a lot of good company, my friend.
Yeah, okay, cool. It's not okay. Here's what I expect. So the writing is fine, whatever. But I don't expect fine from someone like Michael Mann. I expect heat. I expect Collateral. I expect a great experience, right? And what I got was a watered down version of an 80s TV show. I got a guy who is smooth and a good looking dude, a ladies' man who has a mustache and a mullet. Well, it seemed like he had it like combed back on the sides all the time and then up in a bun, so it looked like a mullet the entire time. And I'm like, this is like well, I don't want to say about Avengers because I don't want to give anything away, but like it is an experience I don't want to have watching that guy. I don't want to watch that guy with a dirty mustache and a mullet for 2 hours, you know? So that drove me nuts. And so
I have no retort to that for sure.
And
you are
and
just.
I felt like, okay, what did he direct or he wrote for Miami Vice? One of the two, whatever. He was involved with the original show. So if you do that, do something a little bit different, right? Like I felt like it was like this marriage between the TV show and what would be this show, what would be this movie today. And what I would like is a complete departure. Like that's what I would want. And maybe he was making it for the fans of the original Miami Vice, but surprised me. You know, I was not surprised. Yes, maybe the story was smarter in ways. It definitely was. I love the fact, you're right, that we got straight into the meat of it. They were already on a job, right? Mm-hmm. I love that. Like there's no BS. You're straight into it. So that was smart. And there were a few other smart things as well, but for the most part, it was like expected. I knew there was going to be drug lords. I knew because they're in Miami, and I knew some people were going to die and stuff. But I mean, let's be honest. Other than the guy at the beginning who throws himself in front of the truck, nobody good dies. There's no cost, right? I mean, yes, Jamie Foxx's girl gets kidnapped, but they save her, and then she's in the hospital, but she wakes up, you know. Which brings me to another point of the laziness, and you know what I'm about to say. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. There's a frame at the end when she grabs his hand that sticks for at least 4 frames. Did you notice that?
Yeah. Well, they're setting up that on the one hand, he doesn't know that because that's whenever he looks up and she's still sleeping.
It's after.
Well, I know, but there's a setup and a payoff. They set up that he felt her move and he looks up at her and she's not awake, and so he's like, okay, that nerves, whatever, like that she's not awake. It was the important part. And then he kind of settles back in. Then she squeezes his hand, and then she wakes up. Like there was an intentional like double. I don't think to be fair, I don't think he executed it very well. Like you don't really fully understand what he's trying to do there. It just feels like she kind of wakes up, but she's not awake, and then she really wakes up, and it doesn't make sense visually. And so you're justified in feeling that there was something weird there.
It's at the very end of that scene. They cut away to something else from what I recall. I really want to find it to verify if I'm right or not.
Yeah, I'll pull it up.
Hold on 1 second. Where is it?
Yeah, they end that scene with them holding hands.
Yep.
What's the issue there?
Hold on. Give me a second.
Okay.
Where is it?
It's going to be right around the
Here we go.
2:12:30.
Yep. 2:03:29 or something like that. And then it cuts to Lee on the boat. 203, like 28 or 29. And maybe it was motivated. You know, it was like, because then we don't see them anymore in the hospital. That's the very last frame of them in the hospital. But it's like, it just is very confusing as to why that's necessary if it was purposeful. And if it wasn't purposeful, it's a little bit like...
Well, it's the last time we see them together. Like,
I know.
We're not going to tie up
like,
that storyline any other way than just seeing that she's okay and they're together. Like, I don't think
cut away without a still. Like, why does it have to, like, still frame for four frames? If you're going to still, like, leave it. You know?
I'm not seeing a still frame.
Just on my version?
Gotcha. Yep.
You see it?
Yeah, I was scrubbing through, so I couldn't see it. Yeah, and no, you're right. It did bother me for a second in the movie, and I was like, but I moved immediately on to the next scene. Yeah, no, you're right. They just maybe didn't have quite enough runtime that they wanted, but yeah.
Anyway,
okay.
So stuff like that was just like, that's what made it feel. It just made it feel a little lazy to me. Like, come on, you know, it's a big budget film. You got millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars, like. That's the thing that you notice, you know. It's not even like a sneaky boom pole,
right?
Which could be, you know, it could be an honest mistake. Like, this is like, what the hell was that? So yeah, I mean, that's really it. And I know I'm tearing it down, and that's, you know what, that's fine. I don't tear down that many movies, but with someone like this, you know, someone like Michael Mann, who's so talented, I just expect, you know, high bar, bro.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, I don't know. Maybe I get the Colin Farrell thing. Maybe I'll give him a pass at that. But that's why, one of the reasons I wouldn't want to watch it again. You know, it's the same reason I wouldn't want to watch the 80s TV show. I'm just not into that.
Yeah.
I don't, you know, like, it's not my bag. And just taking somebody who could be super smooth, like, really, what would a guy like that in 2006 or 2005 when this was filmed or whatever, a guy looking like that in a club, talking to the bartender, you know, asking her name. Do you think she'd really give him her name? I don't know. I mean, maybe if it's Colin Farrell, but it was a weird feeling. There were some really bright parts in the film. For me, though, those parts that you were talking about, the part in the limo with the kingpin, the part in the car where they shoot those guys in the very beginning, the part in the trailer home was probably my favorite part of the whole movie, where they storm the trailer home. It felt really real to me. That felt really real. But here's my point. Here's my problem with the two types of camera here, is that that felt more real than all of the other real feeling stuff in the film. So, and that's because it was shot, I guess, on digital, right? It looks, even though it's like shaky, it looks cleaner than the grainy film. So that doesn't make any sense. If you're just a bystander and you happen to, like, I don't know, film a police officer or something, or like an altercation or whatever, yes, it's shaky, but it's also grainy. It's always grainy. So when you give me shaky, you've got to give me low quality, like lo-fi the film. It's got to be, because otherwise it doesn't feel real. It feels like you tried to shoot this on a nice camera, but it was too nice for what you're trying to give me. That's how it felt to me. The stuff in the trailer home was freaking perfect. And I don't know how much digital they had in that. And if they did have digital, then explain to me the other way too clean shots that made me feel off, like at the beginning and those other points that you said that you noticed too. Like, I'm not sure, but it felt raw and real, and I know it was handheld, and so that was, and I was fine with it. You know, I'm even fine with the mixing the static with the handheld. I can even deal with that. It's the formats that were so different and jarring, and going from one to the other and then back to the one was like, I don't know what's going on here, because I notice that kind of stuff. I can't help but notice that kind of stuff. And so because I notice it, I shouldn't be noticing it. I should be feeling it, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, you're not wrong at all. Like, I think everything you're saying is completely justified. I think by contrast, that's also one of the things I really like about Michael Mann is it would have been easy to stay stock in trade, right, with staying with film. And while this didn't work for you, he's done this in film since where it really didn't work. Like, don't watch Public Enemies. He takes a period piece of, I think it's Bonnie and Clyde, or maybe not Bonnie and Clyde, maybe it's some other drug lord back in the day, prohibitionist, bank robber, maybe, I don't know, babyface. I forget which old timey bad guy it is, but and he takes an all digital approach to this period piece, and it really didn't sit well with me. Like, I just struggled. And that was for me when he started really falling off. And Black Cat I enjoyed, but it's a little bit more of Miami Vice in the sense of it's going to be pretty unsurprising. It's a very unsurprising movie. And I think that's a really fair criticism of this film. There's not a lot of shocks, and you are 100% right. There really was no cost to their victory. Like, they just kind of won, and someone got banged up pretty bad. A couple of them did. Like, I forget who Justin Theroux played, but he got his legs shot up. But all in all, everyone lived. Like, that's not bad. No, I think that's all perfectely reasonable. Those are very Brooks Hadlin is a very reasonable man.
I mean, I'm a reasonable human being and a reasonable viewer. I really am. Yeah. I will always give you the benefit of the doubt. I will always try to understand why you did what you did, and I will listen to you explain it to me. And if you change my mind, kudos to you, man. Then you had a good reason. Yeah. But if you don't change my mind, and you did not have a good enough reason to do that thing that you did, that you thought was like really important to do. Stick with the film, man. I mean, maybe they couldn't. Maybe they didn't have that much film. Who knows?
I think he was just, after shooting Collateral, I think he was just really interested in exploring more of the digital format. Yeah. Because you can see a lot of hangover from Collateral in this, not just with the visual style, but also with a lot of the cast, right? We brought back Jamie Foxx and Barry Shabaka Henley. This feels, very part and parcel with that exploration. I think he's just been exploring. And maybe he got tired of making amazing movies, and he was like, "Man, I just want to, I want to experiment and piss people off."
I mean, maybe it's
because he's made some great. I mean, Inside Man, The Inside Man is great.
That's the one with
or The Insider, not The Inside Man. That's Spike Lee.
Right.
The Insider is with not Colin.
Nope, not Colin Farrell. Right? It's
Clive Owen. No, not Clive Owen.
No, it's Matt Damon, right?
No, good God, the Australian. Jeez, what's the Gladiator? Russell Crowe. Jeez,
Russell Crowe. Oh, God. The Australian.
Yeah,
I don't know.
He may not be Australian.
No, he is.
Okay, he is good.
Yeah.
Didn't screw it all up then.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad we did it. I'm glad I watched it because I hadn't seen it before. And there were some really awesome things. Like, I got some really good ideas from this film about violence in general in films. I feel like violence in general is done totally wrong. And this one is spot on. Like, when a bullet hits you, exactly what happens is what happened, right? When it like in the car, that's a great example, or when the guy gets run over by the truck, it's a great example. When I
love the scene whenever Isabella is losing control to Jose Yero, and she walks into the room, and Yero's bodyguard shakes hands with her bodyguard, pulls his own gun out and shoots him in the face with it, and he doesn't understand what's happening until it's already over. That feels so honest in the sense of you don't expect your friend to shoot you in the face.
Yeah.
So he doesn't really understand what's happening, and then you see the surprise as the gun goes off. Like, I completely agree. Like, the way he does violence is, to me, the way, if you're trying to create violence in a scene, this is the way to do it. It's not to overly glamorize it. It's just to let it happen and let you see it happen and be able to not do anything about it.
Yeah, and I mean, even from the onset in the club, there's some. They have to go through a couple of guys to try to catch the guy with the girl, and Jamie Foxx has an altercation with the guy, and it's kind of clunky. It's not, Jason Bourne. Right. I hit him one time and he's down. It's like, no, I got to hit him a couple of times, and then I kind of like put my shoulder into him and get him down. It was like
kick
a
him in
little
the throat.
clunky.
Yeah.
It was like a little clunky.
Mm-hmm.
And so it set it up really nicely. And then I feel like all of the I feel like all the violence was actually done really, really super well, and that gave me some good insight into, like, what to look for in other movies, like how do they do combat, and what's that like, and how realistic is that?
And it goes back to the kind of story you're telling too. Like, it makes sense why the Avengers or Marvel movies, punch 1,000 people at once, right, and they all fly away or whatever. Like, here we're trying to tell a story of violence, and there's movies that are trying to do like violence, and because they just go so far over the top, it's hard to buy into it. Like, you're not suspending my disbelief. Now some other movies, they're trying to, it's an action film, and as I think we both are, let me see what you're trying to create in this world. I want to grade your film based on what you're trying to do, not based on what I want you to do. Because if I came in to Miami Vice expecting Marvel type antics, then I'm a bit of a jackass. Like, that's on me. That's not on on Michael Mann. But if I come into this movie expecting some fun and whatever, like, there's a whole other set of expectations that I think you had coming in that are completely justified, and that he didn't meet. And I think that's totally fair. So
I love that you know that and you still love it.
Yeah,
that's great.
Yeah,
that's great.
That's why, like, there's this great Dave Grohl quote about, like, I don't believe in guilty pleasures. I do. I believe in guilty pleasures. To me, that's the whole idea of cognitive dissonance. Like, I can totally watch this movie and understand why nobody else likes it, but I'm okay with that, and I love it anyway. Like,
I know the quote you're talking about. He then followed up with saying Gangnam Style was the best song of the decade.
Is it really?
Yes, that's what he said. I was like, oh my God, Dave, you back that statement up hardcore.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
Nice.
This is fun, man.
So,
it's great.
That aside, what are you going to recommend this week?
Yeah, so I'm going to stick on the I wanted to recommend Collateral, but we did cover that.
Yep.
Several weeks ago, I think, like episode 80 something. So instead, I'm sticking with the Jamie Foxx theme, and I'm going with Django Unchained. I really, really love that movie for a lot of reasons. I mean, there's some stuff that, like,
difficult. Yeah.
It's very, very difficult. They say the N-word a lot. It's Tarantino. I heard in an interview one time, he said, and I don't agree with this at all. And I don't know. I don't even think that some of his cast agrees with it. But he wants to. He said that in this movie and in The Hateful Eight, he wanted it said so much that it would lose its meaning. So I don't know what that's supposed to mean. I don't think that'll ever lose its meaning. No. So I think he's wrong about that. But this movie is fantastic. I mean, can I just say, Leonardo DiCaprio in this film will melt your brain at how good he is. He's fantastic in every film he does. He's probably one of my favorite actors of all time. But in this movie, he's just off the chain.
Totally different character. It's nice to see someone like him get an opportunity to go sideways.
Yes. Yeah, and which is interesting because that's why I wanted to recommend Collateral, because it was a totally different character for Jamie Foxx that he normally doesn't do. But anyway, Django.
Yeah, and if you haven't seen Collateral, go watch that and go listen to episode 87. Like, we cover it.
Yeah, perfect.
And it's a fun conversation as well.
What about you?
Man, originally I started just wanting to recommend Pusher, which is a Nicholas Winding Refn movie. That's how he made his name, because it's very gritty in the same way that this is gritty. But after our opening conversation about Colin Farrell and how, some films he's better than in others, for me, I had a period where I just really didn't want to see anything he was in. I was just sick of him. I thought he was terrible. And then the recommendation I'm going to make is for anyone who feels that way, go watch In Bruges. It's a movie about Bruges, which is in Belgium. It's a city. And he is absolutely incredible. Like, go watch that movie, and I'm not afraid to say that he's incredible as a failing expectation setup. Like, I think you can know that going in and still really, really enjoy his performance and the movie. It's an excellent movie, perfectly written. Yes, In Bruges. I will see if it's streaming anywhere.
Have you seen The Lobster yet?
Yeah. That's fun. It's weird as hell.
Yeah, it's so weird.
Nice. So
fantastic.
Stay tuned. Next week we are going to be covering Christopher Nolan's Tenet.
Very looking forward to that. We're gonna see it before it even comes out in the theater, which we had said. I think you had said too. We are not seeing this movie until it's in a theater. There's no purpose to see. And I had so many friends saying, what are you talking about? What if the theaters don't open for 6 months or a year? I'm like, then I'm waiting 6 months or a year. There's no purpose in watching a film that was shot half on IMAX on your little 67-inch screen TV in your house and your stupid surround sound. Like, it does nothing for you. And then a buddy of mine who said he was going to buy a ticket and come with us. I don't know if he's done it yet. He's like, oh, where are the seats? I can't sit in the front. I'm like, then you're going to sit somewhere else, bro, because we are in front row. He's like, how do you do that? I said, because a point of going to a theater is to be immersed in the thing. I want it to flood every sense that I have, even my touch. I want to be able to reach out and touch it. And he's like, doesn't it like hurt your neck? I'm like, no, it doesn't hurt. Get out of here. Whatever. So yeah, I'm very much looking forward to this. We've been waiting for this film for a while. So
super excited. Don't forget to subscribe, review us on iTunes, leave us a note if you want us to talk about a thing, and we will probably talk about a thing. This is the result of YouTube user request. I believe it's Hawaiian Prestige Cars. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, buddy. Assuming you're a person.
Thanks, Mr. Cars.
Your mother has an odd sense of humor, or is a visionary. I can't tell the difference. But if you want to leave a note,
maybe both,
on this episode, you can do that at thepestlepodcast.com/Miami Vice.
And our quote of the day is from Ronald Reagan. Leading medical researchers are coming to the conclusion that marijuana, pot, grass, whatever you want to call it, is probably the most dangerous drug in the United States. And we haven't begun to find out all the ill effects, but they are permanent ill effects.
Now,
why did you put this here?
Because when it's hard for me to watch Miami Vice, the only thing that makes it hard for me to watch is that they're participating in the drug war, the war on drugs.
Oh, yeah.
And that bothers me to no end. But because drugs really aren't that important to the story, it's easy for me to kind of tune that aspect out. But it also makes me think of, as the drug war kind of slows to an end, as it's winding down, I think within the next 20 years it'll probably be done. But it makes me wonder how we're going to look back on films like this, on so many like Bad Boys and so many other movies that center on the war on drugs, and there's a clear line of good guys and bad guys. These films aren't going to hold up very well when in the future people are looking at it and saying, wait, we're upset because this person was growing weed? What's the point?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. It's interesting that you say that. Very interesting, actually, because then that also makes you think, let's look at these bad guys in these films. When do you really know they're bad, quote unquote?
When they kill
Is
someone.
it when you see the drugs, or when they kill someone? It's when they hurt someone else.
It's the violence.
You're like, oh, that's the bad guy.
Yeah.
It's not the drugs. Yeah. Because, let's be honest, most of white America does drugs currently. Yeah, it's probably high, right?
I'm smoking right now.
Yeah.
Where's my heroin, honey?
Bring me my plate. What? I don't even know. Except for the two here. We're like probably the cleanest white people on the face of the planet.
It's only because we like working out.
But that's really, but I've never actually thought of that before.
It's not going to age well.
Yeah.
And so thinking in Reagan and Nixon, like they were big proponents of the drug war. I believe it started under Nixon, but it heavily escalated under Reagan. And it's only recently, within the last, I want to say 6 years, because even halfway into Obama's term, he was still doing exactly what he said he wasn't going to do, which was going after dispensaries and drug, like otherwise completely legal state, facilitated shops. Like he was going after. So it took him a little longer than he had promised to start easing that up. And I don't want to get into a whole political thing here, but even though we're quoting Ronald Reagan,
right.
But I kind of like
both
the idea
sides,
that
it's both sides.
It is. It's completely bipartisan. But I love the idea that he's calling on like so much fear, uncertainty, doubt about the completely permanent ill effects of and to be fair, there may be permanent ill mental effects of marijuana. I don't know. I know there's a lot of marijuana proponents who would say otherwise. I feel like there's probably a little bias baked in there, pun intended.
What?
And that's not to say I've never
joke.
smoked. I smoke a few times a year. Like I'm not against it whatsoever. But he makes it sound like the absolute worst thing in the world, right? Probably the most dangerous drug in the United States when, if you compare it to opiates and the opium war. And so I like kind of inserting this for a number of reasons, just because politicians say what politicians want to get out of you. It's never, it's rarely about honesty, and it's more about their ability to wield power and to get the results that they want. And that's not a transparent thing, which we could easily go through 4 or 5 hours of examples. And I was just about to start, and I'm not going to do it. I promise I'm done.
Okay. Don't do it. All right. This has been great, man. This has been great.
Times.
Thank you for the recommendation. That was fantastic. Like we said, make a recommendation and we will do it on this podcast. Thanks for joining us. Join us next week when we'll be covering Tenet. Hopefully you've seen it by then. We don't want to spoil anything, especially for this film, this new film. And yeah, thanks for joining us, and join us next week. Until then, I'm Todd.
I'm Wes.
Go watch the movies. Do my white dance. I do my white dance.